Language is not simply a tool we use to communicate. It is a form of currency, a silent, coded medium that buys respect, opportunity, and legitimacy for those who know how to spend it well. From the moment you open your mouth, the world begins to calculate your worth, not based on the content of your ideas, but on how you deliver them. Your accent, your vocabulary, your cadence. The invisible metrics of linguistic legitimacy operate like an unspoken economy, distributing value not to the most profound thoughts, but to the most polished forms. Welcome to The Still Observer, the channel where philosophy cuts through noise and language reveals power. Subscribe now to awaken thought, challenge assumptions, and reclaim your voice. Pierre Bourdieu understood this with unsettling clarity. He called it linguistic capital, the idea that language functions like wealth. Just as some are born into financial privilege, others are born into dialects, accents, and speech patterns that carry cultural prestige. Those who inherit the right way of speaking move through life with invisible advantages. They are assumed to be intelligent before they've even proven it. They're granted access to spaces where language is not merely heard, but measured. Meanwhile, others, equally thoughtful, equally capable, find themselves barred, misunderstood, or dismissed, not for what they say, but for how they say it. This is the silent cruelty of the so-called standard language. It pretends to be neutral, objective, and fair, but it is none of those things. What we call standard is simply the dialect of the dominant class. It is a historical imposition masquerading as common sense. Those who speak it fluently are rewarded with credibility. Those who don't are subtly, and often brutally, reminded of their place. It begins in school, where children quickly learn that some ways of speaking are corrected, while others are praised. Not because one is more expressive or insightful, but because one mirrors the language of authority. The same hierarchy continues in universities, in job interviews, in newsrooms, and in board meetings. A sentence with a prestigious accent is considered persuasive. The same sentence, spoken with the wrong intonation or grammatical structure, is deemed crude, emotional, or unintelligent. And yet, this hierarchy is invisible. That's what makes it so powerful. People do not see linguistic privilege. They see articulate and well-spoken. They don't hear social exclusion. They hear professional and educated. They don't recognize domination. They call it eloquence. The system operates not through overt censorship, but through normalization. It makes you believe that to be taken seriously, you must sound a certain way. And when you don't, it doesn't need to punish you. You'll begin punishing yourself. This is the violence of language's power. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It doesn't chain your hands. It reshapes your tongue. And perhaps the most disturbing part is this: it makes you believe it was your idea all along. In every conversation, every interview, every moment you open your mouth in public, an invisible evaluation takes place. You're not just speaking, you're auditioning for legitimacy. And what determines whether your words are accepted or dismissed, welcomed or ridiculed, isn't their depth, their insight, or their truth. It's whether they arrive dressed in the acceptable costume. The approved accent, the polished cadence, the sanctioned tone. This is the masquerade of modern discourse. Speech becomes a performance, and legitimacy is the prize awarded to those who know how to play the role. The mask, however, is not optional. It's demanded. And those who refuse or are unable to wear it are quickly cast aside, labeled as unfit for serious dialogue, regardless of what they have to say. Bourdieu called this phenomenon the linguistic market, a field where different ways of speaking hold different values depending on the social space. A working-class accent might hold no weight in an academic setting. A regional dialect might close doors in a job interview. The value of language is not inherent. It is dictated by the structures of power that define what is legitimate and what is deviant. It's not the idea itself that matters, it's who says it and how. A philosopher's insight delivered in a non-standard dialect is often treated as a curiosity at best and an aberration at worst. Meanwhile, a mediocre thought dressed in the garments of prestige is applauded, published, and invited onto panels. The masquerade continues, reinforced by the belief that we're simply responding to clarity, eloquence, or professionalism, when in fact, we're reacting to a code. A code we've been trained to respect without ever being told it existed. The injustice is not only that some people are excluded, the deeper violence lies in the fact that those excluded are made to believe it is their fault, that their exclusion is a natural result of being unrefined, inarticulate, or not ready. In reality, they have been excluded from birth. Their speech was never allowed to carry weight in the halls of legitimacy, and when they try to step into those halls, their voice is filtered through a lens that reduces it to stereotype, to error, to excess. And so the walls of inclusion are built not with brick or policy, but with tone and diction. The gatekeepers need no weapons. They have grammar. They have silent, unspoken expectations of what serious speech should sound like. And they have the ears of a public condition to confuse conformity with intelligence. The most insidious part of this system is that it presents itself as meritocratic. It insists that anyone can succeed and can be heard if they simply learn to speak the right way. But this promise is a lie, because even when marginalized voices master the codes of legitimacy, they are often accused of betrayal, of losing their roots, of mimicking the oppressor. The double bind is complete: remain authentic and be dismissed, or conform and be distrusted. This is not simply a matter of language, it is a matter of power, of who gets to define the center and who is kept at the margins. The mask of legitimacy, once revealed, is not a symbol of refinement. It is a disguise worn by authority to maintain its dominance and to silence those whose very presence threatens its illusion of neutrality. To speak, then, is not merely to share thoughts. It is to risk judgment, to navigate systems of meaning that were never built to accommodate everyone. And to be truly heard, not just tolerated, is a privilege afforded only to those whose voice arrives already wrapped in the symbols of power. At first it seems harmless. A correction here, a joke there, a well-meaning teacher adjusting your pronunciation. You laugh along, maybe even thank them. You tell yourself it's part of growing, of fitting in, of becoming more articulate. But beneath these moments lies a deeper transformation, one that happens quietly, insidiously. You begin to monitor yourself. You hesitate before using certain words. You change your cadence. You suppress the rhythm of your origins, not because you choose to, but because you feel that if you don't, you won't be taken seriously. And this is how it begins, the internalization of linguistic shame. The system no longer needs to correct you. You do it yourself. You anticipate judgment before it arrives. You hear the echo of ridicule before you've even finished your sentence. You feel the weight of a gaze that no one is explicitly giving you, but that you have learned to expect. Pierre Bourdieu warned us of this, that the structures of dominance don't survive solely by repression from above. They persist because they colonize the inside. They inhabit our bodies, our gestures, our tones. What begins as external discipline becomes internal censorship. You begin to believe that your way of speaking, your voice, is somehow flawed, unworthy, and needing refinement. You confuse imposed norms with self-improvement. And so you adapt. You polish your vowels. You tame your metaphors. You rehearse how to sound less emotional, less local, less you. In doing so, you survive, but a part of you dies in the process. Because what you sacrifice is not merely linguistic style. It is the memory of where you came from, the cadence of your people, the poetry of your pain. You begin to perform a version of yourself designed not to express but to impress. Your voice becomes a costume, and the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to remember what you sounded like before. The system thrives on this forgetting. It convinces you that you're ascending when in fact you're dissolving. You believe you're being accepted when really you're being absorbed, cleaned of the excess that made you real. And even when you succeed, even when you master the accent, the diction, the rhetorical polish, you're haunted by the fear that someone will notice. That your voice isn't naturally elegant, that it had to be trained, repressed, and sanitized. This fear is not irrational, because the moment your real voice slips through, it will be seized upon as evidence that you don't fully belong. You'll be reminded that your legitimacy is conditional, that you're only welcome as long as you play the part. But the deepest tragedy is not social. It is psychological, Because over time, you stop blaming the system and start blaming yourself. You internalize the hierarchy. You begin to think that people who speak differently truly are less intelligent, less capable, and less valuable. And when you hear someone speak the way you once did, you cringe, not because of them, but because of what it reminds you of in yourself. The system has succeeded, not just in silencing voices, but in making those voices participate in their own silencing. It has implanted within you a logic of hierarchy so deep that it no longer feels imposed. It feels natural. And this is the final victory of power. When the dominated begin to enforce the rules upon themselves, and when the voice of exclusion no longer needs to be spoken aloud, because it now speaks from within. To escape this, one must do more than learn new words. One must unlearn the shame. One must excavate the buried voice, the one that existed before correction, before conformity, before fear. Until that voice is recovered and reclaimed, the system will continue to speak through us, using our mouths to reinforce its own invisible laws. If language can be used to exclude, then it can also be used to break the walls of exclusion. If it has been a tool to assign value, it can become a weapon to challenge what we call valuable. And if it has shaped how we see ourselves, then it can be reshaped, word by word, into a mirror that reflects not the demands of power but the dignity of the self. To reclaim language is not merely to speak louder, it is to speak differently, to dare to bring the silenced rhythms, the outlawed accents, and the disregarded dialects into spaces that have never welcomed them. It is to stop apologizing for the voice you were born with. It is to stop believing that fluency in the dominant code is the only path to legitimacy. It is important to remember that your voice does not need to be polished to be profound. It needs to be yours. Judith Butler gave us a crucial key. Language does not simply describe reality. It produces it. Every category, every identity, and every structure of thought is born from the words we use. If we lack the words, the world shrinks. If we change the words, the world shifts. And so, when you refuse to conform to the linguistic standards that erase your history, you are not being difficult. You are altering the blueprint of reality. Bourdieu warned that language distributes power. But he also hinted at something more subversive. Power can be redistributed. The prestige code is not sacred, it is historical. It was created by people, for people, to serve a purpose, and what has been constructed can be dismantled. Every time a marginalized voice speaks without imitation, every time a forbidden word finds its place in public speech, every time a stifled accent fills a room without shame, the hierarchy trembles. Because the foundation of linguistic power is illusion, the illusion that some voices are natural leaders and others are naturally irrelevant. But there is no such thing as a natural hierarchy of speech. There is only the residue of dominance, passed down, unquestioned. And it ends where we choose to speak otherwise. The struggle for linguistic liberation is not about grammar. It's about recognition. It's about reclaiming the right to exist without translation. It's about insisting that your way of speaking is not a deviation. It is a declaration. You don't need to soften your edge or erase your rhythm to deserve respect. That the tone in which you love, mourn, protest, dream, that tone is sacred. There will always be those who demand that you speak their way to be heard. But here is the truth. If your voice must be altered to be accepted, then what they accept is not you, but a mask they've chosen for you. Let it fall. Speak in the language that raised you, that comforted your grandmother, that echoed through your streets, through your community, through your defiance. Speak as if your very sound reshapes the room, because it does. Let your language carry not just information, but resistance. Let it name what has gone unnamed. Let it describe the pain that the prestige dialect has no word for. Let it reimagine what intelligence sounds like, what leadership sounds like, what beauty sounds like. Because to reclaim your voice is to reclaim your reality, and in that reclamation, the system trembles. Because it knows, no empire of words survives the uprising of the silenced. No hierarchy stands when its foundation learns to speak, and no history is complete until your voice writes itself into the future.